Om Sarvadharmastapakastvam Sarvadharmaswarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Ayate Namaha. We are studying here Sri Ramakrishna the Great Master, fifth part, the Master in Divine Mood and Narendranath. And in the second section of the 12th chapter, we are read up to para 19. We are read up to para 19 in the second section of 12th chapter. And the 12th chapter is Master Stay at Shampookur. And what we are reading, let us recapitulate a little. Master was diagnosed by the Ayurvedic doctors as having Rohini, which is cancer. And one day, there was bleeding in Thakur's throat. So Narendra had studied the medical books and he said, this goes into cancer. And it will be difficult for Thakur to take so many medicines, Ayurvedic. So they decided to put Thakur into homeopathic treatment. And for a good treatment, and he will have to be served day and night. So they decided to shift him. But they shifted him, he said yes. So they shifted him to a house in Bagbada. Thakur did not like it at all. He walked straight to Balram's house. And 7 days he stayed in Balram's house. By the time they found out a good house in Shampookur. And in the first section we are informed that they thought that Thakur will have to be supplied with proper food cooked by somebody. And we'll have to serve him day night. So they requested, they asked Thakur, shall we call Holy Mother? And Thakur said, you know how much bashful she is, but you tell her. And she agreed, let her come. And she came immediately. And Holy Mother's life was described there. And the second point was solved by Narendra taking leadership and inspiring some other boys, and they stayed there. 3, 4, and later on they became 4 times. Then we came to second section. In that the finances for Thakur and his attendants, and none of Thakur's householder devotees was rich. But then they took upon themselves that we shall do this. And their faith was so much that though they were not rich, they said, we'll do whatever is necessary and we'll serve. But sometimes the faith may come down a little. At that time, some extraordinary manifestation would come from Thakur. That is the topic. And within that, they put Thakur to Dr. Mahendralal Sarkar's treatment. And he examined and took money, but from second time he refused to take money. And the topic, now 2 topics are together. That how these extraordinary manifestations were taking place. And as a part of that, Thakur was influencing the doctor. Now, gradually, slowly, whatever the common opinions were there, and sometimes he was very fanatic in his opinions, Dr. Sarkar. Now, the last point discussed was that he used to express very strong, drastic opinions about all the incarnations. He not only not believed, but he said these are the reasons of India falling down. Yashodanandan and Shachinandan and like that. And that was the... And Thakur said that, see how he talks, but it is true that the lower class of his devotees have too much magnified the incarnations, and that may have produced the reaction. Now we are at this point now, para 20. And the heading of the para 20 is the... I think I have covered all the points up till now in 2 sections. So the para 20 is the doctor's opinion about incarnations of God and his objections to that theory. His surprise at the master's Bhava Samadhi at the time of the annual worship of Durga. Instead of Bhava Samadhi, Bengali is Bhava Vesh. So we may say influx of spiritual feelings, influx of spiritual mood, or influx of spiritual mood, sudden influx. So these are the topics discussed here. Now it starts with telling that 2 of Thakur's disciples, little surprising it will be, Girish Chandra and Narendra Nath, had from time to time many controversies, many debates with the doctor on the aforesaid opinion of his about God's incarnations. Something new we find here, that Girish Chandra was openly talking about Thakur's incarnations, and he had his own way of argument and his faith, but Narendra's name is mentioned here. And we have seen in some previous chapters that Narendra already knew Thakur to be incarnation, and he had a great arguments. So in support of incarnations in general and especially Thakur, he could argue. So many people believe Thakur to be incarnation, but they could not argue. So Girish Chandra and Narendra could argue with the doctor. He won't easily accept. So there were debates, many debates. As a result of which, then what happened? He became a little wary of giving expression to such an opinion. Here I will change the language. To such an extreme antagonistic opinion suddenly. Suddenly means he has to think how to speak. Suddenly he could not express some opinion. They would criticize like anything. So very thoughtfully he had to talk about it. Now actually according to Bengali, the next line will come first. But for English translation it has come afterwards. But the sequence let us understand. As a result of which he became married. As a result of which something happened. And because of that he was married. And that is for, it is connected by for. It was proved that many reasonable arguments might be given against it, against his opinion. So from Narendranath and Girish, he could understand, this is the first reaction, that many reasonable arguments could be given against his opinion. That means supporting incarnation. That made him careful about talking about incarnation, giving his extremely antagonistic opinions. Suddenly, that means he had to think about it. But what could not be accomplished by reason, that means debates had no conclusion, was done by the extraordinary love and sweetness of the Master. That captured Doctor's imagination. Love and sweetness. Thakur loved it from the beginning because he had some spiritual potential in him. And Thakur is always sweet in his behavior. And this is in Thakur is listening to all the debates. But his behavior is sweet. One important point had gone in last class, that Thakur asked somebody to sing the Ramaprasadi song. And the last line he sang as Pran Bhuje Man Bhujana. And Thakur said it is getting reversed. Man Bhuje Pran Bhujana. Mind understands that I cannot reach God. But the heart does not. It wants to reach God at all costs. Doctor was very happy and pleased. He said that yes, all the scientific discoveries have come from this heart, not from reason. Now, done by the extraordinary love and sweetness of the Master, and now the topic is connecting, and by the wonderful spiritual manifestations in him. So Doctor had to believe about incarnation, which the Doctor saw with his own eyes. And that opinion of his gradually changed to a great extent. Not that he was convinced fully, but with them he could not argue. But with Thakur, opinion changed to a great extent. That means it is quite possible that there are incarnations, at least that much. The sudden appearance in the Master, sudden, of the extraordinary manifestations of power that we witnessed, we means including Saradananda, during the annual worship of Durga at the juncture of the 8th and 9th days. 8th and 9th tithis, because days are solar and tithis are lunar. And Ashtami ends, Navami starts. That juncture. In the daytime, sometimes it comes morning, noon, afternoon, midnight. So it is the juncture of the two phases of the moon. And it is that time that the Devi is supposed to have killed Mahishasura. Mahishasura is man's ego. And he comes in various forms. And at particular juncture, when he is somewhat available, he is killed. So, and the Durga Puja itself, all the days, they are very holy occasions. And Thakur would suddenly appear like that. So, that incident is given. Of the bright fortnight of the lunar month of Ashwin. That is all right. It's days of the lunar month, tithis. We could straight away say phases of the moon, 8th and 9th phases of the moon. That year gave the Doctor also an opportunity to witness and examine it. He was present. He was present there that day with another doctor friend of his and examined the heartbeats, etc. of the Master with instruments. You see, actually it is a Nirvikalpa Samadhi. It is not Bhava Samadhi. No, Bhava Vesh. Because all the signs are of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nowhere in any other state the prana stops. In Bhava Samadhi, the prana does not stop. So, heartbeat stopped and they are putting instruments to check it, stethoscope or whatever. with instruments. His doctor friend, that was one Dr. Bhadudi, did not refrain even from poking his finger into the open eyes of the master to see if they would wink. Softest part of the body is that. And there, if you try to touch, the lids come down before you touch. And I touched it, nothing happened. As a result of their examination, they were amazed and had to admit that science could not throw any light so far on the state of the samadhi, in which one appeared to be dead externally to all intents and purposes. They said that medically we have to declare he is dead. But they could not declare that because the consciousness and bliss was radiating. And after the 5 minutes, again he becomes living. In which one appeared to be dead externally to all intents and purposes, as was the case with the master. And that the Western psychologist, in calling this state unconsciousness and in expressing his contempt for it, the Western psychologist, he will say like fitness, epileptic fits are like that. Had but revealed his ignorance. In English they say, judge not lest ye be judged. So in trying to judge this, they are judged. Revealed his ignorance and had proved his stubbornness. Why stubbornness? By not accepting the existence of any world other than this. You start with this, I will not accept, deny. It does not happen. And that there existed many things in God's creation, the mystery of which had not at all been explained by Western science and philosophy. So far, sadhana service is added because if suppose it comes, but it will not come. That also he said. Nor was there any likelihood of their ever being solved in future. Because they try to judge everything as a matter, and it is consciousness. So you understand, in two parts he has put this. That up till that time it has not been done and can never be done by the scientific methods. You know, the science today, what it is called? Postmodern science. Modern science days are gone.
Postmodern.
And in postmodern science, they say it seems that there is something called consciousness. And that we'll have to study it. Okay, but again, for studying, they will make it an object.
At least they accept it.
Yes.
Modern science is
no, modern science it was not there. Modern science, they were aware of a consciousness, which is a reaction of combination. And postmodern science says, it seems there is consciousness. Nor was there any likelihood of their ever being solved in future, but they cannot study it. There are no instruments for studying consciousness. As it has been mentioned elsewhere, now something different is telling us. About this Durga Puja and Samadhi, as it has been mentioned elsewhere. Already this incident they have described in the Sadhana Bhav. It is needless to repeat here how factually true, second point, how factually true were the mental experiences of the master on that occasion. That means before going to Nirvikalpa or coming out of Nirvikalpa, he had some visions. And those visions proved to be literally true. And that is not in front of doctor. Doctor saw the Samadhi. When he externally appeared like one dead. मेरे मृत्युर्न्याय अवस्थित हो सेदिन गईकाले जहाँ दर्शन उपलब्धि करिए छे. So now here we have to read that portion. In the Sadhak Bhav, 8th chapter, towards the end, please. Those who have the Sadhak Bhav, please open 8th chapter, para 26 onward, end of the chapter. Now we'll read from there. If we want to test the truth of the vision mentioned above, some other vision, no other means can be found than believing in the words of the Master himself, spoken at other times to his devotees of the inner circle and incarnation. Living out this vision, we can have the sure conviction of the truth of all other visions of his, because his incarnation, how we can test. For the visions of this nature occur daily in the Master's life when we were visiting him, and his skeptical English-educated disciples were defeated as they tried to test the truth of these visions and experiences. Though we give a few such examples elsewhere, we shall record here one more for the satisfaction of the reader. Here he has to describe the background. It was the end of 1885 when the people of Calcutta, men, women and children were all filled with joy. And October. So, what to say? Towards the end. Last part or something.
Maybe November and Durga Puja, October.
Because he is talking about Durga Puja, not even Kali Puja. We are all filled with joy and enthusiasm, as usual, on the occasion of the great autumn worship and festival. Worship and festival. Durga Puja in Bengal is a very big festival. Although the current of that bliss was being particularly felt in the hearts of the Master's devotees, there was a great obstacle standing in the way of the manifestation. For he, in whose company they felt the surge of delight, was seriously ill. The Master was suffering from cancer of the throat. The devotees had hired a 2-storied house at Shampukur in Calcutta and had brought the Master there about a month previously. August, he had come, August 2nd part. Mahendralal Sarkar, the well-known doctor, prescribed medicine and diet and was doing his best to cure the Master. But the disease had shown no sign of abatement so far. Physically, that is the condition. On the contrary, it was worsening by degrees. The householder devotees would come to that house morning and evening and supervise and make all necessary arrangements. Many of the young student devotees were engaged in the service of the Master at all times, except they went to have their meals at home. Some again would, whenever necessary, spend all the 24 hours there without going home even for their meals. If the Master spoke much or went into ecstasy again and again, the blood in his body would flow upwards and constantly irritate the sore, which prevented the cure. Therefore, the doctor advised the Master to check both the acts, speaking and samadhi. The Master too was trying to follow the prescription, but was in spite of himself reverting to them again and again. In spite of that, he was trying. For unlike ordinary men, he failed to regard as precious the body, which he looked upon with contempt all his life as a trifling cage of flesh and bone. For that sake, how can I stop this? From which he had withdrawn his mind completely. As soon as the topic on God was raised, he would forget all about his body and everything about maintaining it. And to save from this is to maintain the body. And joining the discussion of the topic almost with the same enthusiasm as before, would repeatedly go into ecstasy. There were many souls who came thirsting for spirituality, unable to remain indifferent to the eagerness of their hearts. The master taught them sadhana in a low voice, taught them sadhana, practical, in a low voice, seeing his joy and enthusiasm in the work of ministration to which he applied himself untiringly. Many of the devotees thought that the master's disease was simple and could be easily cured and became free from anxiety. Some again opined a strange comprehension of spiritual matters, that the master had strange comprehension, that the master had purposely assumed that this physical disease for bestowing his grace on the new devotees and imparting religion to many. So he has come to Calcutta. The doctor was visiting him almost every day in the morning or in the afternoon. While he was examining the patient, writing the prescription and advising the attendants, he would be so absorbed in listening to the master's conversation on God that he could not take his leave even after the lapse of 2 or 3 hours. Again, putting question after question and listening for a long time to the wonderful solution of these, he would sometimes say regretfully, I made you talk much. It has been unwise. But don't talk with anybody for the rest of the day. And then it won't do you any harm. Don't you see, your words have such attraction that whenever I come to you, I can't leave this place for 2 or 3 hours and I have to neglect my profession, other visits and other things. I don't even know how time flies. Anyway, don't talk so long with anybody else. Partly as a joke and partly with love and joy, he said, talk thus with me only when I come. That will not do any harm. At this, the doctor and all others would laugh. Now the incident. Surendranath Mitra, whom the master sometimes called Suresh Mitra, was celebrating the Durga Puja that year in his residence at Shimulia. Formerly, his family used to celebrate it every year, but there had once been a mishap and the worship had been discontinued since then. No one of the household was bold enough to perform it after that. Oh, that led to mishap. And if anyone tried to celebrate it, all others dissuaded him vehemently. Strengthened, however, by his faith in the power of the master, Surendranath was absolutely free from fear of any mishap due to the interference of demigods, etc., and did not care at all for anybody's objections or obstructions when he had once resolved to accomplish anything. Therefore, although all the members of the household raised objections, it's all necessary as the part. They could not make him refrain from carrying out his resolve that year. He got the master's approval and brought the mother of the universe to his house and bore all the expenses himself, not other of his family, to the exclusion of other members of the joint family. The only element of sadness in Surendra's joy was that the master would not be able to join the celebrations on account of his illness. Again, as a few relatives felt seriously ill a few days before that commencement of worship, he was held responsible for all that and incurred the displeasure of all the household, but unperturbed even on that account, because Master has approved. Surendra devoutly began the worship of the Divine Mother with great care and attention and invited all his fellow disciples. The worship pertaining to the seventh day of the lunar month had been finished the day before. It was the auspicious 8th day. Same thing. Many devotees gathered together at the temporary residence of the Mother Master at Shampukur and were enjoying in his company the bliss and the talks and songs about the divine. Narendranath began singing devotional songs immediately after the doctor's arrival at 4 in the afternoon. All were charmed by those exceedingly melodious vibrations of tunes, coupled with remarkable spiritual fervor, and lost themselves completely in them. The master was sometimes having ecstasy, at the end of which he was explaining briefly in a low voice the import of the songs to the doctor, who sat beside him. Everybody has forgotten that. Some of the devotees lost consciousness in deep spiritual emotions. There flowed in the room a strong current of bliss, which was almost palpable. Palpable means you could touch it almost. Time passed unbeknown to all, and it was 7:30 p.m. So Swamiji is singing 3 hours, more than 3 hours.
Doctor is also sitting.
And the Thakur is entering Samadhi now and then and explaining to the doctor. The doctor was startled at that. He understood 7:30. He embraced the Swami with paternal affection, took leave of the master, and stood up. When the master also rose from his seat, smiling, and entered immediately into deep samadhi. He is going, so as he is taking leave, some master also stood up. But as he stood up, he went into samadhi. Ashtami. The devotees began whispering, "Is it not the time for the Sandhi Puja?" That is why the master has entered into samadhi automatically. Is it a matter of little surprise that he has entered suddenly into it without knowing the time? About half an hour after, the master's samadhi came to an end and the doctor bade good night. Now, then Thakur told what he had seen. So, in between that description which you read here, tasting and all that. The master now said to the devotees about his samadhi, "I saw that there opened a luminous path from here to Surendra's house. I saw further that attracted by Surendra's devotion, the mother had appeared in the image, and that a ray of light was coming out from her third eye. I also saw that rows of lamps were lighted in the front of the veranda, and Surendra was sitting and weeping piteously in the courtyard in front of the mother. Go you all together to his house now. He will feel much comforted to see you." The hidden element is that they will see all that is true. All, including Swami Vivekananda, then saluted the master and went to Surendra's place. They questioned him and came to know that rows of lamps were actually lighted in that veranda, and unable to check his surge of emotion, Surendra sat in the courtyard before the image and wept loudly like a boy crying, "Mother, mother," for about an hour at the time of Master Samadhi. Finding the vision during the Master Samadhi corresponded to the external events in detail, the devotees felt that there was no end to their joy and amazement. That is the thing. So we have seen one extraordinary manifestation and doctors testing and all that, and it corresponded to the facts outside. So all others are like that. A little mix-up has to be understood. Samadhi was nirvikalpa, but before and after all these visions are there. The disease aggravated. Now what will happen with all this? The month of Ashwin passed, and that of Kartik, and the day of the worship of Kali were approaching. Another manifestation, huh? That is, the other parts of India know that as Deepavali. And Lakshmi Pujan is done on that day. Bengal, Kali Pujan is done.
Yes.
And Lakshmi is worshipped 15 days before that.
Here.
That is done in other parts also, Kojagiri Puja. But Lakshmi special pujan is on Deepavali Amavasya. So it could have been better mentioned here. Huh? But no improvement in the physical condition of the master was seen. The good effect the treatment produced at first was fast disappearing, and there was apprehension lest the deceased should assume a serious death. But the bliss and the cheerfulness of the master's mind, cheerful, appeared to the devotees to increase rather than decrease. Although Dr. Sarkar visited him frequently now as before and changed medicines repeatedly, he did not get the expected result and considered the change of the season to be the cause. And that condition he thought would pass as soon as cold or winter increased a little. That season is a bad season. The description of the wonderful Bhav Samadhi of the Master on the occasion of the annual worship of Kali. Kali Puja Divase Thakurer Adbhut Bhava Vesh. Here also Bhava Vesh is there. Influx of Bhava, we will say. Eh? The devotees witnessed an extraordinary spiritual manifestation at the time of the annual worship of Kali also, as at the worship of Durga. At one time, Devendranath had a desire to bring an image and worship Kali in it, thinking that it would be a matter of great joy if he could carry that resolve into practice in the presence of the Master and his devotees. He made a proposal to perform that worship at the Shampakur house. But the devotees thought that the Master's body would get more exhausted on account of the zeal, excitement and noise at the time of the worship and tried to dissuade him. These words of the devotees appeared to be reasonable to Devendra, who consequently gave up the idea, but on the day before the worship, the Master said all of a sudden to a few devotees, collect all the ingredients for a brief worship. Mother Kali must be worshipped tomorrow.
No, a day before, just a day.
That would be in himself. Happy to hear him say so, they began consulting others, but as they had no other instruction from the master regarding the preparation for the worship, except the aforesaid word, his head soon became quiet. All kinds of suggestions were offered. Unable to come to a decision regarding such important matters as whether the worship was to be performed with 16 ingredients or 5, whether cooked rice was to be offered or not, who was to officiate as priest, etc. They decided at last to keep ready sandal paste, flowers, incense, light and fruits, roots and sweets only, and wait for further instruction from the master, which they might afterwards follow. But the master gave them no more instruction, even when the whole of that day and a half of the following day on which the worship was to take place had passed. The preparation for the worship. It was sunset and it was 7 p.m. Seeing that the master did not suggest to them anything more regarding the worship and was sitting quiet on his bed, they washed clean a portion of the floor to the east of his bed, brought the collected articles and placed them there. While he was at Dakshineshwar, the master sometimes worshipped himself with sandal paste, flowers and other ingredients. Some of the devotees had witnessed it. At last they came to the conclusion that on that occasion also he would worship the universal consciousness and its power, that is Kali, in the symbol of his mind and body, or perform the scriptural worship of the self, Atma Puja, as one with the mother of the universe. Symbol of the body and mind are identical. It was therefore no wonder that they should place the ingredients of the worship near the master's bed in the aforesaid manner. The master did not in any way dissuade them from doing it. The master sat silent. All the articles were gradually brought, incense was burnt, and lamps were lighted, and the room became illumined and filled with fragrance. Seeing that the master was still sitting quietly, the devotees sat beside him. Some among them awaited his command and looked at him with a concerned, concentrated mind, and some others meditated on the mother of the universe. Their minds are getting ready. The room was thus completely silent, and although there were 30 or more persons in it, because Thakur had told we'll do worship, the room seemed to be vacant altogether, so much quiet. Yesterday we saw this quiet in Koyalpada Jagdamba. Super peace. Some time passed that way, but the master even then sat quietly without himself beginning to perform the worship or asking any one of us to do it. Girish Chandra came to a decision and offered flowers at the lotus feet of the master, who entered into Vasamani. The elderly devotees, Mahendranath, Ramchandra, Devendranath, Girish Chandra and others, as well as the young devotees were present. Of them all, Girish Chandra, the master sometimes said, had a superabundance of faith. Paanch ke paanch ana, he used to say. 5 annas and 5
16.
CK means 1/4 of the rupee. with that 5
Multiply with that.
and 5 and 9.
And
So in English, this is superabundance of faith. Many of them were now surprised to see the master take that attitude regarding the worship. He is doing nothing and not objecting to anything. But Girish had a different sentiment surging in his heart. It struck him that the master had no need to worship Kali for his own sake. If it were, that means he wanted to worship, that is not true. If it was suggested that he had a desire to perform the worship under the impulse of selfless devotion, why was he sitting thus quietly without doing so? It did not seem so. Might it not be then that these preparations were meant for the devotees so that they might be blessed by worshipping the Mother of the Universe in the living image of the Master's person? That thought came to Girish. Logically, analytically, it appears correct, but it came to Girish. It was certainly that. Thinking so, he was beside himself with joy, and suddenly taking the flowers and sandal paste that were lying there before all, offered handfuls of them at the lotus feet of the master, uttering victory to Mother. What you must have said? Kali ki jai. Jai Ma.
Jai.
Jai Ma, and offering to Thakur. At this, all the hairs of the master's body stood on end, and he entered into profound ecstasy, his face radiating effulgence, his lips adorned with a divine smile, and both his hands assuming the attitude of granting boons and freedom from fear. Varabhaya. Like this and like this. All indicated the manifestation of the Divine Mother in him. These events occurred in such a short time that many of the devotees who were near Girish thought that he saw the master in ecstasy first and then worship. But actually Girish did, and then this happened. Offered flowers, etc. at his body, holy feet, over and over again. And to those who were a little further away, it seemed that the luminous image of the Devi suddenly appeared before them in the body of the master. They could see the form itself. Now, this is extraordinary manifestation. So the devotee's faith will never lack. They are worshipping God, serving God. The devotees worship the master in that state of samadhi. It is superfluous to say that there was no limit to the joy of the devotees. Each of them managed to take flowers and sandal paste, etc. from the tray and uttering a mantra according to his liking. Giri said Jai Ma. Well, they took some other's mantra. Worship the lotus feet of the master and fill the room with the repeated sounds of Jai. So all were filled with divine inebriation. Some time passed this way when the ecstasy of the master came to an end and he was in a state of partial consciousness. The fruits, roots, seeds, etc. collector for the worship, were then brought before him and were given him to eat when he half conscious, semi-conscious. He on his part took a little of all those things and blessed the devotees so that their knowledge and devotion might increase. Afterward they took his prasad and sang the glory of the Devi and the greatness of her name till a late hour in the night. The devotees experienced a joy they had never felt before at this special worship of the Divine Mother that year, the memory of which remained fresh in their minds ever after. And whenever sorrows and miseries came and they became dejected, that serene face of the Master brightened with a divine smile, and his hands promising boons and freedom from fear appeared before. So permanently they left that impression. Appeared before them and reminded them that they were all under the protection of the Divine. Now, the devotee's direct experience of a special spiritual manifestation of the Master at times other than those religious festivals. It was not only on special days of, I think I should stop here. Then the devotee's experience. The other manifestation is now about Balram's difficulties and Thakur solving them. That is the next topic. Om Sarvadharma Sthapakastam Sarvadharma Swarupaka Acharyanam Acharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.